Okay, here we are again, Truthseeker's Path, and we're with Tom Duggan. He is in Damascus. I woke up to Tom Duggan just by the usual situation where I see his posts. I agree with them. He's plugged in. He's in Syria. He's a Westerner, obviously. I don't know a lot about him, but let's meet him together. Tom, it's very good to meet you. Thank you, sir, for coming on.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, this thing with Truthseeker's Path, it's about the story behind the story. And I see your stories. I agree with them. I see you've got, you're there. You're in Syria. I'd like to know if we could maybe understand what you're doing now, understand when you woke up. We'll go back in time, and then we'll bring it a little bit forward about what you started to do after you woke up. Could we get along? Could we introduce yourself to our audience in that way?
No problem. I'm married to a Syrian girl. My government wouldn't allow a visa for her to leave Syria and come to England when the trouble started. So they blocked all visas. She was my fiance. So I decided to come to Syria. And once we got married, we were married 15 days after I came to Syria, we would then go back to England because then she would be my wife and then I could get her a visa. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. We got married. She decided to stay at the last minute. So I was in this position. I'm newly married. Do I go back, leave my wife in the middle of a war? I think not. I don't think any man would leave their wife in the middle of a war. And within 2 weeks, my eyes had opened because I was here on the ground. And I'm watching BBC, CNN, Fox News, because I didn't speak Arabic. So I'm watching Western channels. And what was happening on mainstream media was not what I was witnessing. That was the day I woke up. It took me 2 weeks to realize that the whole narrative was completely wrong and that you, me, the rest of the world were being fed lies and bullshit, right? So because in the West, my occupation is a cameraman, I started asking if I could film. They refused because basically at that point, Bashar Assad banned all television because basically they were lying. And it was just after the major gas attack where thousands of people died, which I investigated and found to be totally false. So Syrian TV asked me if I would teach some camera work and some lighting techniques for their personnel because most of their professional cameramen had been enlisted into the army. So they were using canteen staff, students, whoever they could get hold of. So I did a training course with them. And I took one journalist out and I filmed her and I said, look, you need to do it a different way. Your work is old-fashioned. So I stood in front of the camera and showed them how we do it in the West. But I left it on tape. And it goes into the editing suite, and they're like, wow, can you step from behind the camera to the front of the camera?
Beautiful story.
And that's how I became a journalist. I'm not a journalist. I'm basically a filmmaker, cameraman. That's what I do, or a DP, director of photography.
You were thrust into journalism by fate.
Yeah, they liked what they seen. And I'd give them an English voice. So I did a year with Syrian television. And then I got accused of being an Assad apologist by Western media. So I decided to leave Syrian television and just work for myself because I needed to make that break away because Syrian television is state-run. Okay, so now I work independently with the blessings of the Syrian government. They've been extremely, how could I put it, extremely helpful in getting me to places that other people don't go to. In 2016, I was the first journalist into Jolan into Hedda village. We got shelled by Israel, we were shelled by al-Nusra, we were shelled by IS, Daesh. So I've been to places other people haven't been.
That must be, how do you find yourself treated by people who are local, who see Westerners perhaps almost never?
Sometimes I don't have to pay for accommodation. Total strangers will put me up on their sofa. Most Syrian people will give me coffee. I was in a major battle once. It was surreal. The Battle of Al-Bassian Square, the al-Nusra did their last big push to try and enter Damascus. That was last year, 2017. And we were filming, and this little old woman came out in the middle of the battle and brought me coffee and cake. But the whole battle on the Syrian side stopped, right? And the shelling still came in, but the shooting just stopped. And then she walked away. Then half an hour later, she came back, and the shelling stopped, the shooting stopped, picked the cups up, went back, and then the war resumed, right? It was a surreal moment. The same thing happened when the World Cup was on. We'd get shelled. As soon as the football match started, everything stopped. Both sides stopped. The government, the terrorists, both stopped. And then half-time, it would start again. And then when the match regained, it would stop. And we were really happy because we'd have 4 or 5 matches a day. So football stopped people getting killed. It's strange, but it happened.
That's interesting. You must be full of stories with so many. How many times have you been up against? That's so intriguing. I think most people have never been, including myself, have never been in a battle zone. How many have you been in, and what's the? I mean, you must have had some shocking experiences as well. What can you share to people who haven't been in those experiences before?
Well, I'm actually starting an initiative up next year, which I'll tell you about in a moment. But I've seen action in Joba. I've seen action in Ghouta. I've seen action in Douma, Dara, Aleppo, West Aleppo, East Aleppo, Jolan, Palmyra, Tadmor, got shelled in Homs. I've had one assassination attempt where they put a bomb outside my front door. I've been shot at repeatedly by snipers in various areas. I've had 2 kidnap attempts. One of the kidnap attempts, I had to fight my way out. And I've got a permanent limp now. I've been wounded twice in the same leg. It's always the same leg. But I need an operation quite soon, but I can't get the operation done until things are quiet, because they're going to have to remove a piece of shrapnel from my foot, and that means I won't be able to walk. And if I can't walk, I can't work, right? Because everything I do is on foot. If you're with soldiers, you're on foot. And I won't travel in armored personnel carriers because they're just one big bullet magnet or RPG magnet. So I like to be on my feet rather than that. But it's been an interesting life. During the East Ghouta and Douma, when they were shelling Damascus, my house was hit 3 times in one day. It was terrible. 251 shells landed in my area. And so it was pretty crazy. But that was unreported. Mainstream media just showed the Syrian Arab Army and White Helmets videos of what was going on in East Ghouta and what was going on in Douma, but nobody showed the death and destruction that was taking place in Damascus. They were shelling us like rain. And I live near a school, so a school is always targeted. They closed the school, and the day they closed the school, the shell landed in the playground.
Did you say school always targeted, Tom?
They're always targeted, schools and hospitals. It's classic. You kill a child, you kill the whole family. Yes. I don't know if you've got children, but you imagine if your child is killed in a shelling or shot by a sniper, that's you, your wife, the rest of the family totally destroyed, right?
Yes.
When I was in Aleppo, I visited intensive care in Arazi Hospital, and there was 2 children there. Both had bullet wounds to the head. They were, say, about 8-year-old. They were shot on the same day within 10 minutes of each other by the same sniper. So I visited the area they were shot, and the Syrian Arab army pointed out where they think the sniper was firing from. He was firing less than 300 meters away with a telescopic sight. Now that's a 4-type. The rifle he was using was a Dragunov SVD sniper rifle, standard Russian equipment. A really nice rifle, actually. It's got a very effective manual range finding system in it, where you match the width of the body, the length of the body, up on one chart, and then you move to the other chart on the crossheads and just go to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and it gives you the exact range, and that's the crosshair that you use. So it's a very, very simple technique, but very effective. And I set my camera at 4x zoom on my SLR and looked through, and I could see people's faces. So I know that the sniper who shot the 2 little girls who were 8-year-old could see their faces, right? And that was done as a psychological warfare to destroy the families. Okay, it happens all the time. They target school times when schools were leaving. Damascus, there's roughly around about 11,000 children being killed at school time in Damascus in 8 years. Over 30,000.
11,000 children in Damascus in school time in 1 year. Is that correct? Is that?
No, in 8 years of war.
In 8 years in Damascus, 1 city, 8 years, and school time children,
11,000 children killed and maimed. Yeah,
unbelievable. And nobody wants to report that side because it doesn't fit the agenda, and that is a criminal act to put agenda before facts. If you're a journalist anywhere, you have no business engaging in that profession.
There's 30,000 people being maimed in 8 years in Damascus.
In 1 city, 30,000.
Yeah, in 1 city. And the main target area is Bab Tuma. Well, was the main target area, because Bab Tuma has 11 different ethnic groups there. Right?
Main target is the ethnic group central, the most diverse place, and that's for a reason as well.
Yeah, basically you have the Shia community, several different Christian communities, different Sunni groups. So it's very cosmopolitan, the old city. Bab Tuma is the old city. So Bab Tuma is the gate. It's the gate of Thomas, right? It's the main entrance into the old city. Then you have Bab Shari, which is another gate. There's 7 gates around Damascus. And that area, the old city, not the new city, was always targeted because it's within 1,000 meters of Joba, which was al-Nusra stronghold. It's within 2 kilometers of East Ghouta. And then when Duma was going on, the main target area changed from Bab Tuma to Jaramana, because I worked as a medic in Jaramana. When I'm not using the camera, I work as a volunteer medic.
Well, what does your volunteer medic role ask you to do most of the time? What does that encompass?
Jumping in an ambulance and going into shelled areas. So there'd be a shell lands in. When I was doing it, was the last time I did it was Jaramana. We averaged about 4 calls a day. There'd be an explosion, and we drove straight into where the explosion was, pick the people up, put them in the ambulance, deal with them, get them to hospital.
Incredible life, Tom Duggan from the UK in Syria, on a marriage effort, and marriage was successful. Going back, it didn't happen. Your life, could you imagine for a minute how your life must have changed from a comparably cozy life in the UK, I have to assume. Compared to this, anything would be.
Well, I'm happy in what I'm doing. This is going to sound really crazy to people. I love what I'm doing, right? Because I've always, my parents taught me the main things a parent should teach children is what's right, what's wrong, and what's good, and what's evil, right? So you come to Syria, you then see what's right, you know what's wrong, and then you see what's good and what's evil. So what's happening to Syria is just not right, and it's just so evil. And the monsters that Syria has been facing, and I'm saying monsters because I know what these people do, right? I've interviewed women who, at the beginning of the war, had their lips hacked off because they had too much rouge on. I've interviewed women who were kidnapped and forcibly married. Not once. One woman was married 10 times. So every day she gets up, she's got 2 children, right? The 2 children she's got are to terrorists. And she never agreed to the marriage. She was forced into the marriage. So they legalized rape by giving them a piece of paper saying they're married, right? Rape has been used throughout this war by the terrorists to destroy the women. If you come to Syria, if you look at Syrian women, they're very, very modern. Short dresses, makeup, long hair. They are very feminine looking women. They're not this type, right? That's a minority. But when the terrorists came, if you had too much makeup on, if you smoked, I interviewed one guy who had his 2 fingers chopped off because they found nicotine on his fingers, right? He was dragged out of a taxi and they chopped his fingers off so he could never hold a cigarette again, right? That's, to me, is horrendous. I smoke, I drink, I listen to music. All these acts were banned, right? A woman wasn't allowed to talk in front of a man. A woman had to sit on the floor. This is Wahhabism. This is Saudi Arabian style of treating women.
This is what the U.S. supports.
Well, the U.S. supports everything that's wrong. At this moment in Palestine, I mean, I don't want to go on about Palestine because Palestine isn't my specialist subject, but Palestine, Israel is a terrorist state. It was built on terrorism. The first suicide bomber was Jewish female. The first car bomb was done by the Israelis, right? You have the King David Hotel where they did the explosion there. They hung British soldiers from trees. Okay, there was a Count Bernadetti from Sweden who managed to get 10,000 people out of concentration camps during the Second World War. He was then made UN ambassador for Israel, for Palestine. The Palestinians liked him because he treated them equally and he wanted both communities to live together in harmony. What happens? He gets assassinated by the Israeli terrorist group, and the guy who was in charge of the assassination became Israel's president. So look him up, Count Bernadetti, assassinated 1948-49, right? And this guy saved thousands and thousands of Jewish lives. They should have built a street to him.
And who was the president who assassinated him?
It was the first president of Israel. I can't remember his name, but you can look it up. It's well documented. And now you've got America, the only UN power, identifying Jerusalem as the capital of Israel now, right? And you've got all these deaths taking place in Israel of Palestinians. Today is Al-Nakba Day. That is Arabic for the Great Catastrophe. That is the day that they lost their homes. Every Palestinian who lost a home carries a key to his front door. It's a cherish because their one dream is getting their front door back, right? So you've got idiots like Trump who have now decided that the state of Israel is now the capital is Jerusalem. They're doing exactly what happened to the North American Indian. They're doing exactly what happened to the Armenians when the Turks did the genocide in 1915. They're just repeating it. The Palestinians have got no rights, and that's wrong. And
that's wrong. The vision of right and wrong is so important. The parent upbringing, it goes back to having a desire internally to fix what's right. Your specialty's in Syria, but a lot of this does emanate from outside of Syria. That's why so many foreigners are in Syria. 90 different countries it might be 90% as well. What percentage of the rebel groups, so-called rebels, which we know are foreign mercenaries, a lot of them, what percentage of them are foreign today, Tom?
Well, it goes back to 2014 in the Battle of the Damascus airport. The FSA, the Free Syrian Army, which was the revolutionary political army, it wasn't Islamic. In that battle, one of our generals stood up and said, "We welcome all Mujahideen, we welcome anyone that will fight with us." Right? Overnight, they had a massive influx of foreign fighters came. Right? They joined the Free Syrian Arab Army, and then about 6 months later, they had a coup d'etat. They overthrew the Free Syrian Arab Army. The leaders of the Free Syrian Arab Army retreated, ran away to Lebanon. Those who were left, the officer corps, the sergeants and that, were all given two options: join us or die. And in one village, they executed 125 officers and men. Right? After that, your Islamic period started. Your Islamic fundamentalists period started. You have Helsinki, which is Chechenian. You have Joshua Islam, one of the most feared and most hated groups. They're equal to IS. They're really, really bad. They were the ones that were in charge of Duma. They've executed thousands of people. They've maimed thousands of people. Then you have IS. IS has at least 82 different countries' nationalities in it. Right? Joshua Islam, and you've got Al-Nusra. Well, Al-Nusra is Al-Qaeda, right? It's the Syrian branch of Al-Qaeda. They are the ones that run the white helmets, the ones that the West love, the poster boys of Syria. Right?
Al-Qaeda running white helmets. Al-Qaeda which started off with, as far as I know, Brzezinski's effort to topple the Soviets. 6 months before the Soviet invasion, Brzezinski's funds were going into the Afghani Mujahideen, which became Al-Qaeda. And we see that same Western-funded efforts going through. Now they've got the NGOs pretending to help save civilians, getting pictures for use by Western media to keep the people supporting the war or supporting the expansion of the war.
Yeah, there's a big organization called the Syrian Campaign based in New York. You need to check them out. I had a really bad argument with one of the PR executive, Mary Fitzgerald, I think her name is, an Irish name, I can't remember her now. And she was saying, how can you talk about the white helmets because she supports the white helmets? This organization was started off by the US State Department, called the Syrian Campaign. Well worth looking into. The White Helmets was founded by a former British mercenary called John Le Messier, who was a consultant to the Foreign Office. Boris Johnson has increased the funding this year by a further, I think, 65 million British taxpayers' money. And now Boris Johnson has just been found out by the Daily Mail that the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, based in Coventry, which is a one-man operation, had received close to £1 million from the British government, right? And basically, it's a propaganda outlet for terrorists. He deals with videos from IS, videos from White Helmets. And what you see on television is them videos, because BBC, ITV, they don't send people to the front lines. Jeremy Bowen goes to the front lines, right? But he doesn't go right in there. He spends 45 minutes, then comes back out. They've got some images of people shooting and stuff like that, okay? But most of the images you see are on British television, American television, are supplied by terrorists. So the images you're seeing are one-sided, right? And nobody is shooting from the Syrian positions. It's all shot inside the rebel-held areas, and they're showing a one-sided view of what's going on.
Well, thanks to people like you, Tom, for coming out there and showing us the other side. Vanessa Beeley, Eva Bartlett, and a handful of Westerners are in Syria during war. You're probably the one that you're the only one I'm aware of who's been so extensively I mean, the list of battles that you named, it's unbelievable. I don't even know how many it was, 20 or 30 or 40 different situations that you've been in. Incredible.
Well, I'm in the same position as every Syrian in Syria, every real Syrian. Damascus was shelled repeatedly every day for the past 8 years, right? If you go into my street, there's 3 shell holes in the middle of the road leading to my house. If you look at my landing, there's a hole in the wall where a shell landed. If you go to places I go on a regular basis, you can see impacts on walls, impacts on buildings. When people visit Damascus, I take them for a walk around. People like activists, there was a French journalist here the other day that I took her for a walk around Damascus. And I showed her places where people had died, right? Not a pleasant thing to do. But what you have to remember is all the target areas that they aim for were high density targets, not military targets, but civilian targets. For instance, crossroads were always hit, right? Repeatedly, because you've got 2 lanes of traffic joining onto each other, which means it's a busy area. Schools, hospitals. Now, I've recently come back from my last trip. I did Palmyra, I did Hama, I did Dazor, and I was on the outskirts of Raqqa, right? In Dazor, and nobody's done this in the West, right? For the time that the Syrian Arab army was surrounded in Dazor by al-Nusra at first, then IS came and al-Nusra left, because they both work hand in hand. 12 doctors and 20 nurses saved 4,000 civilian lives in 2 years. Most of the diseases that were around was tuberculosis, hepatitis A, and malnutrition and rickets. Now, no one in the Western media has reported the fact that the only way you could get food into that area was by airdrop or by aircraft. That's why the airport base in Dazor was so important. Every soldier in the Syrian Arab army adopted one family. Wow. And they shared their rations. No one's reported that. I was there 3 weeks ago, right? I spoke to the doctors, and they said if it wasn't for the soldiers sharing their rations, they wouldn't have been able to feed the people. So, because you can only get a certain amount of aircraft in at a time, right?
Let's speak some logic to the people who haven't yet quite understood, Tom, because this, I just thought of something quite clearly. The locals in any country, Syria, just any of the 100 and something countries out there, the locals care about the people that die in their country because their neighbors, their family, their relatives, their friends of relatives, their workmates, their colleagues from school, from children's families, all this context, they care. The people who don't care are foreign paid mercenaries who don't bring their family. They're young men and they're looking for a fight. They don't care. Who does the U.S. support? the latter. And who does Bashar Assad rely on to survive? The former, his own people. So who does the West say Bashar is attacking? It makes no sense. It makes no sense to believe the official story.
Okay. The official story, the official narrative, is completely false. The Syrian Arab army is made up of volunteers and conscripts, right? Okay. The only way you can't be in the Syrian Arab army is if you're a foreigner, because I tried to join them and they wouldn't accept me, because when Damascus has come close to falling 3 times. So I've tried to join the Syrian Arab army 3 times, right? And they said, well, I'm quite happy you doing the camera work rather than picking up a rifle. Because I know what to expect if Damascus falls. I know what would happen to my family. I know what would happen to me. And I will defend myself to the best of my capabilities. So, 3 times Damascus has come close to falling. The Syrian Arab army is made up of conscripts and the volunteers. The volunteers are mainly Sunni, right? Okay, because that's the biggest population. Shia, Christian, and Druze, right? And other minor sects of religion, right? Okay. Your terrorists, fundamental Islamics, Wahhabism, Sunni, right? So, when the Syrian Arab army fights, and I've witnessed this, they look after their people. I've seen them giving water to people. I've seen them feeding people. I've seen them carrying old ladies across the street, right? I've seen them giving medical care. When East Aleppo was liberated, and notice I use the word liberated, right? None of the UN, none of the Red Cross or the Red Crescent, no outside agencies were there. The only people that were there at the reception center was the Syrian Arab army, the Syrian Arab army food supply, their cooking, right? And the Russian medical teams. Okay. The BBC pulled out of East Aleppo coverage 4 days before the liberation. The reason they pulled out is because they couldn't justify their narrative that they've been using over the past few years, right? Because they were saying the white helmets were great. All these activists were on television 24 hours a day saying, this is my last message. They're going to kill me. The Syrian Arab army is coming. Not one of them activists was ever captured. Not one of them activists was ever killed. And when you go into East Aleppo at the liberation, none of the locations made sense, right? Because what I saw of these people, these activists, like the guy who works for CNN with the beard, the clown, right? I can't remember his name, and the young woman and all them, right? None of the backgrounds matched what I seen, okay? And when I went in, I couldn't get internet, I couldn't get a signal on my mobile. So how are they transmitting from an area that I can't get a signal? So how are they getting a signal? So
Fake
all
news.
these actors.
Yeah. We've seen it many times. They promote the war from a studio set in Atlanta, Georgia.
Yeah. Or
it's ridiculous.
In
Things
Turkey.
like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. I mean, on this trip I did, the last one, I was in a place called Kasab, which is on the Turkish border. It's an Armenian town that was overrun by Al-Nusra. They ransacked the town, destroyed all the churches, right? The village next to that, further down, that was overrun by the Turkish army using helicopters in support of Al-Nusra and the Free Syrian Arab Army, right? And I mean, these were Christian villages. I'm not going to get into religion. I don't bother with religion. If you ask a Syrian what religion he is, he'll say he's Syrian, okay? It's against the law here to criticize someone else's religion. I'm not a religious person. I believe in God, right? Because in war, you always believe in God. It's like your safety factor. but I don't put myself as Christian, Muslim, whatever, okay? But the ransacking of Christian villages at the beginning of the war was all ethnic cleansing. Now, Joba, the main leader in Joba, who was Baghdadi, he said that if they got into Damascus, they would carry out ethnic cleansing on the Christians, the Armenians, and the Shia, right? And yet, his organization, Al-Nusra, is classed as a moderate rebel. There's nothing moderate about ethnic cleansing, right?
No.
Nothing moderate, right? The fact that when I was in Duma, I found papers on how to make woolly peter, white phosphorus, how to make napalm. I filmed missiles the length of a bus that they'd smuggled in section by section. I found an iron foundry that could produce over 1,000 shells a day. I found chemical supplies. I was with CNN. CNN was standing right next to me.
That has the fingerprints of a state-run operation. Is that what you're getting at?
It wasn't a makeshift operation. This was major operations, right? Well financed, well organized, right? I mean, CNN was standing next to me and they refused to film the stuff I was filming. And they went outside and filmed a jam factory that the terrorists had took over to make jam.
Did you ever have a word with some of these people and try to get into their head? Like, you see what's going on and you're deliberately ignoring it. What sort of a human being are you?
Right. I'll give you a story. In Aleppo, I was sitting in a hotel and having coffee with some other journalists, mainly Syrian journalists, and a couple of activists that were there. And Finnish TV came in and he went, "Hi, Tom, how are you doing? You got any new stories?" I said, "Yeah, I've got a good story for you. East Aleppo." "Yeah, what about East Aleppo, Tom?" "Okay, I've just been speaking to the Ministry of Health in Aleppo, and it turns out that they ran clinics inside the terrorist areas that they supplied medicine to, that they paid the doctors and nurses a salary, and they've done this in every occupied area where the terrorists are, to provide medical aid for their citizens that are living under occupation." And you went, "Oh, we've known that for 3 months." I said, "Well, why didn't you publish?" That's a good story. The reason it didn't publish is it shows the Syrian government in a good light, and they'd rather keep them in a bad light. And he got red-faced and walked away. The CNN guy who works with CNN, I had an argument with him in Duma, right? They kept walking in front of my camera, deliberately cutting me off. And I had an argument with that camera woman, I had an argument with him. And when I was filming using night vision in the tunnels, they kept shining their torches towards the camera, and that was affecting my images, right? People pushing you out the way, nudging you out the way, and stuff like that. It's all press pack stuff.
Petty sabotage. It shows the infantilism of the way that these people. Where do they find these people? On the one hand, they're brave enough to go out there. On the other hand, and they're journalists. On the other hand, they're not brave enough to tell the truth. It's just mind-boggling to me, Tom, that this sort of a human being is so easy to find, and so many of them.
Well, the way mainstream media work, right, and which is appalling, right? You okay? Something happened there. I'm getting feedback.
Oh,
right?
Sorry, no, I'm fine on this side.
Right, that's okay now. I was getting feedback there. Anyway, what is appalling is that mainstream media will use independent filmmakers on the ground here. They'll pay them a minimum salary. They'll take all the risks, shoot the footage. The footage is then transmitted back to the UK, America, wherever, and then their narrative is done on the footage, right? That's how it works. You don't see British cameramen running around on battle zones with a camera on their shoulder. You don't see BBC people or ITN or SBS or CNN running around in the middle of a battle doing a report. Their reports are normally done from a hotel window or from a building or in a safe area, right? The main footage they get in, they buy from other people who are taking all the risks. Now, BBC got...
Yeah, sorry to interrupt, Tom, but these other people, although they're low level, they know the agenda and they're trying to get the footage that is required of their agenda, and they're trying even further to disrupt your work on the ground there, knowing that you're filming something more accurate. Actually, you're filming reality.
Yeah, well, it's all to do with the dollar, right? Because basically there's no money in Syria. So, I mean, there was a 16-year-old child killed 2 years ago. He was operating for one of the mainstream media outlets, well, several of the mainstream media outlets. He got caught in a crossfire between the Syrian Arab Army and al-Nusra, right? He's 16, he's running around with a camera. He knows nothing, right? But he's making money. That money will support his family. Because most people here have been living on their savings for the last 8 years. Yeah. And their savings is now running out. I'll give you an example. A manager in a bank, his wage is about 50,000 Syrian pounds a month. It's around about $150, okay? US dollars.
Yeah.
That, if you own your own house, you're great. But if you're renting a house, because Damascus is full of people from different areas now who've left their home areas for safety to come to Damascus, so property prices have risen on the rent-wise, right? A 2-bedroom apartment will cost you 150,000. So what's happening now is families are living together as one. So yeah. Brothers and sisters, cousins, everything are living together. What also happens is single people are now flat sharing because they can't pay for the accommodation. Okay, if you're earning 50,000, where are you going to get 150,000 for your rent? Okay, now I smoke English cigarettes. At the beginning of the war, 200 Syrian pounds a packet, right? The same brand 2 years ago reached 650 Syrian pounds a packet. So now I smoke a local brand, which is back to 200, right? I know smoking's not a good thing, but it's just an example. The cost of food went up. Everything went up. Cost of oil, cost of petrol, but the wages didn't, right? In all war zones, prices rise. It's a matter of supply and demand, okay? And sanctions are destroying this country. Sanctions are killing people. I dealt with children with cancer not long ago, and they're having to use third world countries' medical pharmaceutical supplies because they can't get Western supplies in, because Western supplies are banned by sanctions. In Aleppo, in Homs, in Tadmor, in Dara, you go to hospitals and all the machinery has been shot up by terrorists before they leave, because they know they can't get the spare parts, they can't get new equipment, right? And if they destroy the hospital infrastructure, they destroy the equipment, it means they're killing more people. Because one day, my brother-in-law had a chest problem. We had to go looking for an ultrasound to see what was wrong with his chest. We tried 5 hospitals and we couldn't find an ultrasound working, right? In the end, they had to cut him open and look manually inside to see what was wrong, to put it right, right? So if you can't find a simple machine like an ultrasound, right, how are you going to deal with a CAT scan that's been shot up? In Al-Azri Hospital in Aleppo, there was a room the size of a newsroom, the size of BBC, ITN, SBS, whatever newsroom, which would do about 50 desks. And it was full of broken machines. And what they were having to do was cannibalize the machines to keep the other machines that were operating going. because they couldn't get the spare parts. I lost a young boy called Job because he had hydrocephalus. Hydrocephalus is water on the brain. The stint, which is just a tube that goes inside the stomach and goes into the brain to drain the brain of the water, wasn't working properly, right? They couldn't get another one. So we arranged for him to go for an operation to Malaysia. And in the meantime, he got chicken pox. So we couldn't put him on an aeroplane, right? So his operation was delayed by nearly a month. He died. He died because we couldn't get a tube to go into his brain. Right?
Tom, you've seen so many sad stories, and the kind of crimes you describe make the even just an insensitive person very angry at that aspect of humanity. And then it all ties back to Western funded money, which ties back to the war economy and the resources that are available in this global agenda to set up some megalomaniac world government on the blood of these people you describe. And it's really interesting to hear from you the level of these details. With, I mean, you just could go on and on with thousands of stories over the time that you've been there, more than a year anyway.
Can I tell you?
Yeah.
Can I tell you one story? One story that's very special. That's very special to me, right? In the battle for Aleppo citadel, I had to cross an area of ground that was sniper covered by al-Nusra. It was roughly half the size of a football pitch or half the size of a rugby pitch. And we had to run across that. And as I ran across, the Syrian soldier that was with me, every time I zigzagged to the left or the right, he zigzagged to the left or right. He was in perfect synchronization with me. And I could hear the sound of bees going by. Bees are like bullets. Bzzzt, 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 and the sound of a gun going off in the distance. And then I realized what he was doing. He was putting his body between me and the sniper, right? We get to the safe area and we take cover. And I'm going crazy because every time I went this way, he went that way. Every time I went that way, he went that way, right? And I said, what are you doing? You're a young man. I'm an old man. You're putting your life at risk. And his words to me were, and this is, I'll always stays with me. His name was Yusuf, which is, I just call him Joe, right? He said to me, I'm a soldier in the Syrian Arab army. Your world, your country, your television thinks we are animals, thinks we are bad men. I need you to show the world that we are good men. So your life is more important than my life, right? And that always stuck with me, right? Because under fire, someone using their body to shield you, right? So that you can get the story out. So people say I'm biased. I'm like this with the Syrian Arab army, right? Because I've been with these guys and I've seen them do tremendous things. I've seen them feed people out of their own ration bags. I've seen them give water to terrorists when they've been captured. I've never seen them maltreat anyone, okay? I've seen them arrest people and put them in the backs of vehicles to be sent off for interrogation because they're terrorists, right? I've seen them in East Aleppo where the terrorists have defected and all their crimes have been forgiven. They've been given a stamp, piece of paper by a judge saying you're absolved of all crimes, welcome back into Syrian society. I've seen the Syrian government, to avoid loss of civilian casualties, give these animals, these monsters, green buses and free passage out of Douma, Joba, East Ghouta, East Aleppo, free passage unhindered, right, to safety in order to save lives. I have never in my life witnessed or had historical information on the British Army or the American Army giving people safe passage. Terrorists, Germans, Vietnamese, all the wars, Koreans, safe passage out of an area to save the civilian population. Syria is the only place on this planet that has ever done that. In Mosul, in Iraq, the Americans and coalitions shelled the shit out of Mosul to kill IS. I have no idea how many civilians were killed, but I would estimate it in the 30,000 plus region easily, okay? Because no figures have been released. Nobody was evacuated from Mosul. There was no green buses. So when I see the Syrian Arab Army and the Syrian government putting terrorists into green buses and send them to Idlib under safe passage, right, to save lives of civilians, right, because nobody wants civilians killed here because they've been through enough. That tells me that the Syrian government, the Syrian people, are humanitarian. I don't know what you think about that, but can you name any war where that the opposite side has sent in buses to remove the soldiers from the enemy side?
No, Tom, I'll tell you what, my mouth is just wide open now because I knew that. I'm digging through pieces of news and scraps of stories, and I discern. I use my God-given or natural, whatever it is, discernment, and sometimes I'm off, I'll tell you what, but sometimes I'm generally on target, and you're filling in so many gaps for me right now. I see that. I know it's true.
Yeah, but no other government has ever done that. No other government has ever done that.
Who is funding the rebels, Tom? In all the information that you've got based on stories and eyewitness accounts, anything you've got, who is funding this war on the side of these foreign mercenaries that are coming into Syria?
Right. Originally, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and most of the Gulf states. But America, the USA, has played a major part. My government has played a major part. It's all done by third parties. The Americans will buy weaponry in former Eastern Bloc countries, Armenia, places like that, because they've got stockpiles of lots of Kalashnikovs, 7.62 ammunition, RPGs. They'll ship them to places like Jordan and ship them across. Same thing in Lebanon. There's a tunnel network that runs from Lebanon into an area called Quara, which was IS controlled. Mossad had a base in them tunnels, which was on the border with Lebanon. Mossad also, Israeli intelligence, had a base in Joba. They also had a base in East Aleppo. Israel is a major stakeholder in this war, and Turkey is like really behind a lot of the things that happened here. When they attacked, the FSA attacked some of the Christian villages, they had Turkey helicopter support, right? Which is well documented. I did a documentary on Aleppo industrial zone, biggest industrial zone in the Middle East. 2 years before this so-called revolution started, the Turkish government sent delegations in to Aleppo, to the factory area, the industrial zone. They went in there because they were saying, well, we want to do something in Turkey the same way. We want to look at your production facilities, how you work, how you operate, right? They went in there and they took serial numbers of machinery. They took all the information they could. And then all of a sudden, 2 years before the war started, you had the economic terrorism, because Saudi Arabia and the West was paying people not to go to work in East Aleppo, paying them dollars. They were getting twice their wage in dollars not to go to work, because that destroys the economy factor of East Aleppo, of Aleppo. Then when al-Nusra comes into East Aleppo and West Aleppo, an industrial area, Turkish technicians come in and strip down all the main plants and send all the generators, all the machinery, all the factory equipment back to Turkey. So this war, both the war and the economic section of the war, was planned 2 years before the war took place. And delegations were there to see what they could steal.
And orchestrated at the top by the West as part of these ongoing resource wars that seem to gobble up one resource-rich country after another, like dominoes, one at a time, with a gaggle of wealthy, powerful thieves coming in from all sides with media, money, terror groups from outside, weapons, medicine, anything that the side needs to go against the official government that's there, and just continue the raping of the planet. That's anyone that's sovereign, anyone that doesn't have a Western bank in their country, anyone that stands up to the West. And it seems like they start off with the countries that are the freest. I mean, the most equal, have equal rights, and have a secular society, and have a peaceful society with a good life equality. We'll talk about some of these before-after pictures that you see in Libya and Syria, Iran before the trouble started there. Well, Iran still is a beautiful country, as we can see in pictures. Ukraine, Afghanistan, just goes on and on. Yemen goes on and on. The same criminals involved. There is an orchestrating mind at the top, and there is a plan, and it filters into these different countries, and these countries have agreements to benefit immediately at the same time as long-term, but I guess they get double-crossed as well, because Iraq thought they were part of the team. Turkey thought they were part of the team.
The Kurds thought they were part of the team, right? The Kurds were double-crossed by the Americans. I mean, originally when the Kurds were supported by the Syrian Arab Army, at the beginning of this war to protect the Kurds, the Syrian Arab Army gave them tanks, weaponry, and everything else. And then all of a sudden now, America supports the Kurds. And this is the paradox that I find strange. You had the Turkish Air Force taking off from a runway to attack the Kurds. At the same time, from the same runway, you had the American Air Force taking off to support the Kurds and attack IS, right? Now that is crazy, right?
Crazy.
And now the USA has turned its back on the Kurds, because basically Turkey has all these bases that the USA needs, right? The only base outside Turkey that the USA could use is the British bases in Cyprus for aircraft, right? So Turkey has got this ace card up its sleeve. If you want to cover the Middle East, you need our bases, both land and sea. So that's how they can dictate, right? They're a member of NATO, yet they're in Afrin, which is a Kurdish area, right? Which is inside Syria. They've committed atrocities there. I've already told you that at the beginning of the war, they used helicopters from the Turkish army to take Christian villages near the Turkish border. Turkey has played a major part in this war. America has played a major part in this war. In Raqqa, this military base is being built at this moment in time, right? American bases. All America has done is used its propaganda techniques and its PR techniques. The Free Syrian Arab Army has now become the Syrian Democratic Army. All it did was change the name. Right?
Just words.
Yeah, just words, just propaganda, just good PR. That is made up of former IS, former Free Syrian Arab Army, former Al-Nusra, Helsinki, all the other terrorist groups into one group. Right? Now, they tried this earlier on, about 2 years ago, where they said, we will send people in who have no terrorist background, They got 60,000 replies. Out of that 60,000 replies, they found 50 that only passed the security test, right? They sent them in, and they immediately defected to Al-Nusra or IS, okay? They sent 4 groups in. So now they've changed their tactics, and what they're doing, you've got the Turkish using the Free Syrian Arab Army, Al-Nusra, and everything else to fight the Kurds, and you've got the Americans who are using the Free Syrian Arab Army, Al-Nusra, all under different names, a new branding to attack Syria, right? And that's what you've got in Raqqa. And then you've got IS and Al-Nusra in Idlib and Helsinki and all the other hardliners. So they're all still the same people. They're all still the same fundamental ideology. They're all still there doing it. And what the people in the West don't realize is a Syrian soldier gets roughly $50 a month, okay? A foot soldier in IS or Al-Nusra is on $150 a month, right? But they also get a share of the booty. They get a share of the loot, just like pirates did. The captain gets the major share, the ship's officers get the next share, the bosun gets the next biggest share, then the sailors got the share, the same as pirates. So everywhere you go, and I'm a great Robert Capa supporter. I love photography, and the work Robert Capa did in Spain, the Spanish Civil War, in the Second World War, Normandy beaches. I emulated his work, right? I love his work. His work in France, you go into a building, there's a broken radio, there's a broken chair, right? You go into a building here on the front lines, there's no light switch, there's no light bulb, there's no furniture, there's no tiles, there's no piping. They strip the area bare and transport it back to Turkey to sell, right? There are shops in Turkey where for $5 American you can buy anything on display in the shop. And I'm talking about plasma streams, washing machines, stuff like that, all stolen from Syria. So there is big business here at work. And then you've got the artifacts, like in Palmyra. What they couldn't move, they chopped the heads off. What they could move, the smaller stands, were moved. And what they did was they blew everything up to hide the theft. Okay? It's like if I robbed a building in England and I set the house alight, that covers my theft. There's no DNA, there's no fingerprints, there's nothing. This is what they did, right? They have deliberately raped this country, right? And its people. If you go to Jolan, which is illegally occupied by Israel, the Zionist state of Israel, right? You'll find that Genie Oil, which is Rothschild, Murdoch, and other people, are selling illegal oil rights, drilling rights, to private companies to drill for oil on illegally occupied land, right? And when Israel attacked Syria, just the other week there, I got a phone call at 1:30 in the morning saying there's something happening in Jolan. Do you know anything about it? I phoned Jolan up. I spoke to people on the ground there, and they told me quite frankly that Al-Nusra and IS were attacking an area in Golan called Qatram, and that the Israeli army was supporting them with artillery fire, right? And for the first time ever, the Syrian Arab army returned fire. And the reason they haven't returned fire prior to that is because they had too many problems to deal with IS, Al-Nusra, Helsinki, and all the other terrorist groups. Now these terrorist groups are losing, so Syria can now deal with Israel, right? Any attack from Israel can return. Within half an hour of them firing back into Israel at selected military targets, Syria was attacked, Damascus, by Israeli jets. That attack lasted an hour. Then there was an hour's gap, and then there was a major attack, right? And Israel replied immediately. But what you have to look at is Israeli television showed pictures of Israelis running to bunkers in
Yes.
Jolan, right? There's been 8 years of war in Syria. Syria doesn't have any bunkers. So
Right.
Israel is prepared for war. You don't build bunkers unless you expect to go to war. So Syria never built bunkers for the population. So they didn't expect to go to war. And nobody's looked at that question, right?
No.
Because that tells me that Syria is a peaceful country. It just wants to live and get on. But nobody wants it to be peace. They created this problem. The West has created this problem. Turkey's created this problem. And Israel is really behind most of the stuff you find happening here. Israel has, it's all intermixed.
Money and the deaths of many millions of civilians across all these wars. It doesn't matter at all when there's $10 trillion at stake in resources and arms contracts.
I will never forgive these people. I will never forgive these people. I've held children dying in my arms. I've stitched people up. I spent an hour watching a doctor in intensive care trying to put the brains of a child that was 18-year-old back in its head. And the only thing that was holding the head together was the skin, because the cranium was completely crushed through these shells landing. I can never forgive people for that, because every time someone in the West saying Bashar al-Assad's a monster, the Syrian people are all terrorists, the West has done a really good job, the white helmets are great, I can't get these images out of my head of what I've witnessed and what I've seen. So I always fight for Syria. And I believe I'm doing the right thing. Because if you watch a young boy bleed to death in front of you, that stays with you for the rest of your life. If you're carrying a girl who's got half her head missing and you go to the hospital and they're trying to put her brains back in, that stays with you all your life, right? And there's no need for it. This was a country where they had free healthcare, free education, free university, okay? Deaf people were given video phones so they could see people and lip read, right? Blind people were given braille computers so they could communicate with each other, free. All medical treatment was free, right? We have in England the National Health Service, which is falling apart. But Syria's health service was great before the war. It's in tatters now because there's no equipment left, all the stuff, we can't get stuff in due to sanctions, right? You name me one other country that gives free education and free university training, right? Does your country give you free university?
No, not at all. And the only other country I can think of that might compete, and I wasn't there, but Libya, people claim that Libya was nearly the same in some respects.
Yeah, and Libya is flat, right? Okay. Gaddafi, right? Gaddafi, you could, with Gaddafi, I spoke to his daughter not long ago. You could get a loan to buy a house from the government. You could get a loan to start a business from the government. You had very cheap electric, you had very cheap water, you had very cheap petrol, right? They had a good life. They had a really good life, right? And that was all taken away from them. People in Iraq, now everybody says Saddam Hussein, crazy man, right? But his country worked. Everybody says Gaddafi, crazy man, but his country worked, right? So if you look at Libya and Iraq today after Western liberation, right, nothing works. Libya's gone back to the slave industry. They're selling black Africans as slaves. That never happened. The oil field production has gone down. The only person that profits from that is the oil producers of Saudi Arabia, the Gulf states, and Genie Oil.
War makes resources cheaper, Tom. When the country's in total dysfunction, there's no counterparty to negotiate prices with.
Yeah, and resources is the cause of wars because you always want other people's resources. It's always been the same. Yeah. Every war that's been is about resources.
Tom, it's a pleasure to have you on. I want you on again. God bless you. You're doing great work, and it's just your natural ability your natural abilities are coming to the forefront. You're making a huge difference. This story should go around the world. People need to get the insights that you've got with your eyes, your time spent there, the things you've seen, the people you've talked to, the facts that you've collected yourself, the information you've got and feelings you've got about what's happening there on the ground with the media, with the people, with the government, with the war, with the money flows. It's all so important. And it's not just Syria. Syria is perhaps the hot zone right now, but the hot zone's been moving, and it will continue to move. It's the same people involved, Tom. Thanks for doing your work. May you said you believe in God, so let's just say God bless you. Let's say that keep those friendly, protecting spirits around you. You're doing great work. Thanks so much for sharing.
Anytime you want to speak to me, just give me a bell. Okay, I'll do this again whenever you want.
Thank you very much. Have a good day, and keep yourself safe as much as you can.
I will do. Okay. Thank you for your help. Hands off Syria. Stay safe.
Definitely. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.